Hey everyone. Hey everyone in chat, and good night, I guess. Welcome everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, no matter where you're at. Hey, thank you for tuning in. If you're watching this on the VOD after the fact, thank you for watching. This one's gonna be a fun one, everyone. I don't know if you can tell. I'm excited for this one. Welcome to another wonderful Hack the Box AMA. I'm, as always, your hostess with the mostest, Dark. To everyone that I had the pleasure of meeting recently at DEF CON and other events, hey, you're awesome people. You know who you are. But everyone who's here, hey, you're extra cool because you're here now. Now, let's go ahead and get in the meat and potatoes of this. Without further ado, we have one of the wonderful and extremely talented folks from the one, the only Dragos pentesting firm here. Tyler Webb is here. Tyler, let's go ahead. I can bring you on. Hey, Tyler, welcome. Thank you so much for being here.
Thanks, Dark. You're making me blush over here. I'm stoked to be here. I'm looking forward to this chat. Yeah, thanks for having me.
Yeah. Oh, there we go. I was worried your video froze for a moment, and I'm thinking, oh no, oh man. Okay. We had a slight video freeze last AMA, and I was wondering if it was going to be a little bit of a fun start to this one. No, for everyone in chat, Tyler hasn't gotten my full fangirling. I wanted to save that for this because, Tyler, I didn't express to you how excited and how cool I think ICS pen testing is. And let's actually take a step back and let's tell the good people about ICS pen testing, shall we?
Yeah, okay. Well, if we want to break down the acronym first.
Yeah, if you don't mind. Thank you.
Yeah. Industrial control system. Let's also add OT to the mix, so operational technology. I like to use the phrase OT pen testing, so operation technology pen testing. To make it real simple, I like to use a little saying that Rob Lee coined, which is OT is IT plus physics. So think about everything we consider in the IT realm and then add physics onto it. So when we're pen testing ICS OT, a lot of times same techniques, a lot of time same objectives and goals, but the actual I guess the end game is to figure out how someone could cause a physical impact. So that's my definition in a nutshell. Feel free to ask questions, Dark, if you want elaboration.
Yeah, no, of course. And thank you for mentioning that as well. For everyone that's in chat, we have a lot of wonderful people here. Thank you all for being here. And for all the staff here as well, thank you for your support. Cutting to the chase, if you guys have questions for this wonderful person, wonderful human being that we have on today, please put them in chat. They can be silly within reason. Sure. Yeah. We might have another bread situation on our hands, but we won't worry about that. There was a bread craze for a little while. It was a good time. Anyhow, thank you for telling us a little bit about ICS pen testing. So you talked a little bit about how this differs from normal pen testing with that physical side. Is there anything else you'd like to explore there with regards to how this differs from a normal pen test, or how this differs from how you might learn about what you're doing? Just speaking broadly.
Yeah, I think two things come to mind. The first one, a lot of folks on the call might be familiar with the idea of a kill chain, right? We have the Lockheed Martin cyber kill chain. I like to use a kill chain approach when we're doing pen tests for the reason of helping a customer understand, like, hey, we break a link at this point, or this point, and we kind of disrupt the adversary capability to achieve their goal. There's another kill chain, the ICS cyber kill chain. Why I bring this up is I think it's a really good, really important foundational kind of baseline to give a framework for what we're doing with OT testing. Take the Lockheed Martin cyber kill chain, all of that to your action on objective at the very end. That's all stage one. That's effectively, if we're talking about OT adversaries, they're trying to get access to an industrial control system and be in a position where they can understand it, start developing capabilities to impact it, cause that kind of physical process impact at the end. So that's stage two. I'm going to share some links at the end of this, maybe to you, maybe, I don't know how you want to do that, but that is like one paper I would suggest everyone who is interested in ICS pen testing read, just to kind of get that lay of the land. The other big one that comes to mind is, since we're working with physical, process control and devices that govern physical things, safety is like paramount, right? These are plants with moving machinery, with turbines, with all sorts of things that can cause human harm. So safety is paramount. We take a much more kind of white glove, tiptoey approach. I'm trying to think of the right words, but we're very, very, very cautious and very collaborative in this.
I don't know. I really like tiptoey. That's I feel like that's a professional term now, or at least it's something I'm going to use in a report.
Let's do it.
You make me think of Tom and Jerry cartoons of just a cartoon tiptoeing around the corner. That's how you pen test, right? You got the full yeah. Anyhow, no. Where were we getting distracted? Yeah, no. Did you see our question in chat about your shirt?
I did. I want to give a shout out to Emma Ruth Rundle. Everyone go listen to her. She's incredible.
Go ahead and follow that up. Heck yeah. No, we're great. I was getting distracted there. We're getting some awesome questions from chat. To everyone that's submitting questions, you guys are great. These questions are awesome. I'm blown away. Yeah, I am going to make sure we get a nice mix of those, and then the questions that were submitted before this. No, thank you for talking about the care that comes in with this. So we talked a little bit about starting the ICS pen test. Here's a question that we had submitted. This is a really good one to start out with. How do you normally walk through your engagements? Could you talk through an ICS engagement planning, or ICS engagement planning rather, and how it might differ versus a standard pen test? I know we've briefly touched on this. Feel free to explore around that as you want.
I think at a high level, I mean, I think each firm might be different. You're going to have your own approach to this, but at a high level, I'll just talk about kind of the Dragos approach. Lots of communication, lots of collaboration, really firmly defined rules of engagement and scope kind of as the baseline. So we'll have a kickoff call with the customer. We will discuss their objectives, their goals. And I'm going to go on a little tangent here. So wrote me back to this question, but I think there's a difference between objectives and goals in pen testing. It might just be semantics. However, I really, for me, this helps me conceptualize things really well. So objectives are like where we're trying to go. We're starting with it, foothold A, trying to get to point B. There's a success criteria there. The goals of a pen test for me are always all the things that are byproducts of that. So identifying vulnerabilities, validating them. Do they actually matter? Do they actually exist? Looking at visibility and detection, validation, doing purple team stuff. All these other kind of things are side effects or byproducts of you pursuing your objectives. So anyway, kickoff call, we will define those objectives with the customer. And given that ICS environments are typically, well, not always, nuclear is different, but we typically
nuclear is different. Hold on.
Nuclear is different.
We need to back up to that. You can't just drop a comment like that and then pull away. Like is this a normal conversation?
I'm not the person to answer all the questions about nuclear environments.
Okay, but I want to back up. Recently. Is that a normal question for you at work where it's okay, we're going to talk about nuclear, but that's not cool enough for me right now. Okay.
No, we're going to get into how ICS environments are structured. So there's the Purdue reference model, which basically says like you have corporate, you have business, you have the OTDMZ, you have the OT business network, you have the process control networks, you have layer 1 with all the actuators and all that kind of stuff. So right, there's like a 5 to level 0 structure there. Why I say nuclear is different is they count in the opposite direction. I learned this again, ICS pen testing,
big
ICS
difference.
Security in general. You're going to just constantly be learning things. And I feel, especially where I work, all my peers are way smarter than me. So they get to put up with my dumb questions about that. Anyway, nuclear is different.
Do I need
let's roll me back to how we structure an engagement, how we plan it. After we've defined our objectives, we get real clear about what the rules of engagement are. And within an ICS space, that's a lot of like, we're not going to do X, Y, or Z technique, and we're not going to touch these systems. Really clearly defined scope, both in terms of what assets you're touching and what sorts of techniques you're using throughout there. From there, I like to approach as many of these pen tests as kind of a hybrid purple team as possible. So we want to have folks who are from OT engineering. We want to have the IT cybersecurity team. We want to have people from all parts of the house involved and kind of collaborating here. I think that's where these get most effective. That's not always what a customer wants. That's what I try and drive folks to, though. I think that's really the engagement planning overall. Do you have any other questions, or is there anything in the chat?
So I wanted to follow up on one point there. You touched on this, and this is something that I think is probably important to go over, especially for folks that haven't been in maybe a pen test scoping call. You spoke about how you plan your engagements with the scoping there. How that's not always what the customer wants and that you're sometimes guiding them towards that. Could you speak to that and kind of maybe some common pitfalls folks would fall into? Just kind of an interesting area to explore as we're talking through this question. Just really wanted to put you on the spot there.
I have an excellent response here, and it's something that I've had to practice and kind of dial in a lot over the last 2 or 3 years. So at Dragos, we very much differentiate between red teaming and OT pen testing. And we like, if we're doing objective-based pen tests, so there is an aspect of that kind of red team mindset. We're using a lot of red team techniques, but we have not only a constrained scope, but a constrained time frame. So 1 week to 2 weeks for these network pen tests, where I have learned and still have to practice guiding a customer towards the most effective kind of use of their time and our skills and expertise comes into them wanting to do evasion. So we've learned to talk to folks about like, hey, if you want us to try and bypass EDR, cool. Let's set a time limit on that. Let's set that for maybe a day. And if we haven't figured it out by day 2, if we've done everything we know of, let's just peel that layer back. Let's take it off the foothold, and let's assume some adversary who has way more time and resource than us is in your environment for 6 months. What could they do then? Let's just pull that security assumption, drop it in a pile, and say, hey, it worked. That's a win. CrowdStrike's great. We're doing good there. What can someone do if that fails? That's a conversation that is sometimes tricky to have, because we'll have pushback from customers being like, well, then what's the point of your pen test? And we're like, well, the point is looking at things from a defense in depth perspective. Sorry, I use perception because I'm writing a little blog on this, and we're not going to get into that. Defense in depth perspective. But what I'm saying there is like there's so many layers to be analyzed. And I think an effective pen test is going to be looking at all of those things, not just hitting one wall and saying, hey, you're good. So that's an example of where adjusting a customer's expectations and kind of guiding them, teaching them, mentoring them through that process.
I was taking a moment to process your analogy. If you don't just look at one wall and say you're good, I am going to steal that. No, that's wonderful. Thank you for walking through that, and thank you for breaking down that nuance. Just because that's something that you have to be in one of those discussions to experience kind of that unique situation with that. No, thank you for breaking that down. Just as a quick shout out to everyone in chat. Y'all are, again, still killing it here with these great questions. I'll do my best to get to as many as we can. Heck yeah. Tyler, was there anything? Yeah, go ahead.
I have actually Brian's question at the bottom of the chat, I think is a really relevant one right now. How do you balance the tiptoe approach with the need to be thorough? I think that's a great question. And I think I have a couple answers there. So one, what my team does is kind of takes the approach of, if we're looking at this from an adversary perspective, again, this is a blend of red teaming, pen testing, adversary simulation, and purple teaming. Like it's a weird bubbling cauldron of what we think is most effective. The balance between tiptoeing and being super cautious and being thorough is that, one, we're looking for the first way, we're looking for the path of least resistance to an impact scenario, to being able to access the process control network and access an engineering workstation or an HMI or PLC or something that has a further interface. Do you mind if we
go back to those acronyms?
Yeah.
You said HMI, PLC. Could you just expand on those briefly?
An HMI is a human machine interface. So think of like how human beings will interface with process control. It's typically like, I don't know if typically is the right word, but think of a big touch screen, a kiosk mode kind of computer where it's either, sometimes it's read only, sometimes it's just displaying information. With certain privileges, you can actually change things. There'll be buttons, there'll be all sorts of stuff. So that's how you interact with process control. EWS, engineering workstations, are where engineers or operators will be able to load new code or do programming on these devices. Often those are loaded with all sorts of vendor software. Those are juicy targets for us because we can, if we have access to one of those, kind of keys to the kingdom. PLC is a programmable logic controller. So that is what is actually interfacing with, it's the real-time operating system computer that interfaces with the actuators that are actually doing the physical things. So like the last step before all the physical processes. Back to the tiptoeing, we're going to look for the first way we can get access to those kinds of assets. And then if we're in a lab, maybe we will take it all the way. We typically don't. We typically theory craft from there with the customer being like, okay, we're on the HMI or we're on the engineering workstation. What is a bad day for you? What does that look like? Because if it's in a production environment and everything's running, we're not going to touch that. We're not going to even think about that. If it's in a lab scenario, totally different story. And those are my favorite pen tests because you get to actually start doing protocol manipulation. You get to exploit stuff. Few and far between within ICS pen testing. Because of that, careful tiptoeing approach. But back to that question, I think the way you balance that is you explain the reason for prioritizing safety, operational reliability, and I guess efficiency of the engagement and coverage. And you make sure your customer knows that, hey, because we're taking this approach, because we have a constrained time frame, we may not find every single vulnerability in your environment. We're looking for the ones that matter the most. I hope that answers your question, Brian. If not, drop something back in chat.
Would you really say you're trying to look for you mentioned the path of least resistance, that low hanging fruit? Are you really trying to get the things that an attacker would first go for, just to try to give businesses more of an accurate perception? I'm trying to think of the best way to word this. You're trying to give them a real life, this is what's actually going to happen if you are targeted by a nation state actor or something like that.
I think so, yes, to a certain extent. Like, we don't do adversary emulation per se, but we try and structure a lot of the techniques, or we try and fill our tool bag with a lot of the techniques that we see folks using in the real world. And I think that brings us back to another really good baseline conversation, which is the idea of living off the land techniques. We see more and more adversaries using living off the land in all the industries that are being targeted. VoltSide or Volt Typhoon is a really good example of that. So if y'all want to do some homework about a threat group, I think they're one to look at, just in terms of how they move through a network. Those are the things that we see as really efficient and effective, and what we try and replicate when we're in a customer environment. So I think low-hanging fruit might be a little bit of a misnomer, because when I in my mind, that's like looking for default credentials on web apps that may or may not have any association with the OT environment or process control. That's something that maybe you would look at in a network vulnerability assessment, and you package that all up and be like, here's all these things. But I think what's really important about pen testing is it provides OT pen testing, at least the flavor that we've been trying to conjure in our little cauldron, is that it provides context for the findings and the vulnerabilities. So it places them in the contextual cyber kill chain that says an adversary needs to get from here to here to here to here, and these are the vulnerabilities and or techniques that they would be exploiting or leveraging to achieve that movement. Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, and I thank you. I wanted to take a brief moment just to thank you for breaking down that low-hanging fruit and how that sometimes can be a misnomer, especially how that pertains here in ICS. I really appreciate you taking a moment just to pause on that. Let me go ahead. Just a quick heads up. I did give you a couple more questions in chat. We had some awesome ones come through. I want to let you know you're mentioning a lot of awesome articles and awesome links. If you want, feel free to throw those in our chat, and I can then post them over just to make that easy. Just because you had mentioned the framework that was like the MITRE ATT&CK framework, and then a couple other links. I think one mentioning the Volt Tycoon, that group or that software package. If you wanted to link something on that, not to put you on the spot doing a bunch of.
I will look it up. I think my favorite write-up was a Microsoft one, but let me capture those and I will drop them in chat in a little while.
Yeah, no, that's great. Thank you. Yeah, no, just at your leisure. I guess I'll ask you this just because I want to feel out your comfort on this question. There is a question that I asked you about in chat. Are you okay with answering that one, or would you like to skip that one?
I am okay answering it. I don't know if let me read it.
Yeah. Let me go ahead and I'll close that banner we have up. Yeah.
I wish I wish I could tap in a bunch of my Intel folks. I don't know if. So we're looking at Christopher's. Yeah.
Yeah. Let me go ahead and pull that up.
physical hardware hacking is something that might be asked for.
Mm-hmm.
At Dragos, we used to do more physical hardware hacking, and that's something that I've actually been studying for the last few years. There's some great classes. I have so much homework to do.
Yeah. Oh, don't you worry. I have we're going to talk a little bit more homework here in a moment because I want to talk about the Pro Lab. Just because we're talking about a lot of exciting things. We'll talk briefly about how these awesome folks in chat can go and try this out for themselves.
Hell yeah. Back to the physical hardware hacking, it is a thing, and there are firms that specialize in it. Dragos does not. We've kind of moved away from that. One, I think it's takes a lot of experience and expertise to be able to do that. So you're interacting with the device at kind of a electronics, like actual physical level.
Mm-hmm.
That is useful. That is not how we see adversaries causing process impact across the industries that we're kind of tasked with protecting. So electric, water, oil and gas, that kind of stuff. In terms of the pagers, my initial feeling is that's more of a supply chain thing. Like there's an explosive in your pager now. How did it get there? How do you look at it? There would have been some additional logic introduced to how that pager is programmed. Yes. I don't know that that's something to take with us into ICS security and ICS pen testing necessarily. Christopher, let me know if you have more questions there.
No, thank you for talking through that. Just very topical and something that just we need to be careful with. But yeah, no, thank you. Let's go ahead and briefly, do you want to talk about, let's see. Let's go to one other question here. This is one that we had submitted, getting back to the planning and the actual operations of an IC pen test, or IC pen test, ICS pen test. Losing my mind this morning. What OSINT techniques can be performed to identify ICS or industrial control systems or other systems that might be related? Are you using tools like Shodan? Are you using, again, similar OSINT tools? Do you find yourself sticking to a lot of what we would see in other pen testing methods?
I would say that's very accurate. And then what you're just going to apply is like, how do I filter down the information to be relevant to industrial control systems? So if y'all Google like using Shodan for ICS, there's a whole bunch of, there'll be so many tutorials on like what to look for, how to look for type of PLC or Modbus being exposed on the internet, all kinds of stuff like that. I would say Shodan for sure, top. In our pen test, we don't do a lot of OSINT. We're usually doing an assumed breach. So we start with footholds within the corporate environment or the OT environment and look at what can be done from there. So in terms of like what we do on a day-to-day basis, not as much.
No, thank you for speaking to that. Yeah, no, that makes sense, being something that you wouldn't necessarily see on a day-to-day basis, but more of just those special operations. Out of curiosity, kind of a related question, do you ever find yourself doing spear phishing or other similar social engineering in your operations here?
Never. Not at Dragos, no. That's why I guess we can talk about assumed breach and why we take that approach as opposed to being a full-on red team and trying to get that initial access vector. That takes time. And that's also attacking people. You're kind of looking to leverage some kind of human error there.
Yeah.
And I always kind of, it's a feels bad kind of approach to me. It's not to say that that's not relevant, but I think that maybe we should just assume that that's going to happen, not make that someone's like memory of their day or their week, and just say, hey, okay, let's give us an account with the most base user privileges. Let's see what we can do from there.
Would you say that
it goes back
Go ahead.
It just goes back to the scope and the time frame. right? So like, how do we make this a valuable and efficient engagement?
Mm-hmm. I guess on that note, heading in the same direction as you, would you say that you're more focused on the software, trying to find actual bugs rather than issues in like HR training and things like that?
I think, and it gets weird. Again, I keep saying this is like a hybrid blend of red team and pentesting and purple. We will be testing people, processes, and technology, all of them, mainly looking at like, what are your secure remote access processes? What technology supports that? How do users get access to that? Like, what is the protocol for them being submitted to that group to be in the Active Directory group that allows them, let's say Citrix VDI on this specific network? Can you repeat your question?
Yeah, no, absolutely. And now this isn't to put words in your mouth or anything. Would you say you're more focused on your traditional kind of bugs? You're looking for either software issues or logic issues, something that is an actual tangible issue rather than something that might be a concern with one individual?
I think that we are, yes, but I think it differs depending where in the kill chain you are and on what side of the IT/OT boundary you are. So when we're in corp, we're dealing a lot more with trying to pursue privilege escalation either on a local host or throughout Active Directory. And we're kind of just trying to do a rinse and repeat of privesc, lateral movement, dump more creds, do the thing, maybe get to DA. And I want to put a huge, big flashing caveat here. I think it's really important that everybody understand that like domain admin is a tool. That's a level of access. And that's just one more tool that once you get there, now you can start looking at putting yourself in the groups that give you the access across to a VPN group or to some remote access thing into the PCN process control network, OT network. So on the corporate side, it's a lot of Active Directory focused stuff. If Active Directory seems really locked down, then we start looking at host exploits. So things like Print Nightmare will still leverage quite a bit. Other like relaying attacks, all that kind of stuff, still typically focused on expanding our foothold on the corporate side to a place that we can then jump or pivot across the IT/OT boundary. Once we're on the other side, then it becomes a process of looking for those logic bugs, looking for more targeted software vulnerabilities, let's say in vendor, like ICS vendor software, doing operator breakout, kiosk breakout kind of stuff on an HMI. So we move from like a lockdown read-only user to someone who can actually change the display screens or interact with process. So it shifts. There's a shift in what the goals are from stage 1 to stage 2.
No, that's interesting. Admittedly, I want to return to that here in just a moment. We had one related question come up that I want to jump to this just before we move on. Related somewhat, I guess, to OSINT and those other non-ICS or kind of different kinds of pen testing or services. Are there other non-intrusive services or other non-pen pen test services that you offer on a regular basis, or find that you're offering often enough that is worth noting on this? Yeah,
I think it's really important to view cybersecurity as a journey. It's not a static thing. It's not a you have it or you don't. It's you keep working at it, you keep refining. And so if we put it on that kind of spectrum, I think pen testing and purple teaming and those offensive and detection focused types of engagements, the intrusive ones, fall at kind of the very end. So you want to make sure that you have a defensible architecture. You want to make sure that you have network visibility. You want to make sure that you've done as much as you can throughout your environment to kind of protect things. Otherwise, a pen test doesn't give you any value. If it's just like, here's 300 findings, doesn't matter. It's not useful for anyone. Mm-hmm. So what the approach Dragos takes is there's a whole slew of services engagements that kind of precede pen testing that follow customer maturity. That's things like helping folks develop an incident response plan. That's one of the key controls for industrial cybersecurity, is having an OT specific incident response plan. So we usually start there. Like, do you have a plan for when things go bad? Okay, cool. Then we move on to architecture reviews and cybersecurity assessments that are focused on looking at how the network and remote access and doing what we call crown jewel analysis. So identifying kind of a top-down view of what the most critical components in your process for your business are. All of those things are non-intrusive. Those are more interview-based engagements. Mm-hmm. And then we'll roll into maybe tabletop exercises where you're testing these things, but it's still not intrusive. It's not actual injects, or there's injects, but it's played out in a boardroom where you're talking with all the key stakeholders, but there's not people doing hands-on stuff. And then eventually you'll get to pen testing and then purple teaming. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, no, thank you. Thank you for exploring around that question as well. It just leaving me thinking that it feels that ICS pen testing, it almost comes across as like an expansion or DLC for normal pen testing. It's a little bit more. It's a lot of the same. It's surprising to me how much normal pen testing is in this.
I'm gonna steal, so you can take my tiptoeing comment. I'm gonna take the DLC comment. That's a really good one. It's true. I think it's true. It's interesting when I look at like my mentors. I have folks who have taught me so much about living off the land and some of the access side of things, and I have other mentors that have really helped me understand how ICS protocols work and how the devices work and all the different things you can do from like more of a physical perspective. And there are so many sides to this. It's multifaceted. Yeah.
Yeah. No, I just man, I was almost taken aback there. I wanted to return, let's see. We had some awesome questions here. Let me see if I can find one that is more directly related to this. We'll go ahead and start talking about this, and I'll see what I can find because we had a couple questions related to this. I want to talk about, so we've gone into the mix of what ICS pen testing actually looks like in the real world, talking about what this looks like in practice. Now that we've kind of talked about what it is, how would you recommend someone that's new, that how could they get started on this? Would you recommend that they start with normal pen testing? Is there a way you can jump straight to ICS? What would you recommend to someone that's just excited about this?
I think right now there's no way to just jump straight to ICS. I think that's very difficult. I think there are effectively 3 routes to kind of find your way into ICS security. And that's working for a vendor. So let's think like the Siemens or the Rockwells or the GEs or the Schneider Electrics of the world, the folks who make the industrial control devices. I think you can find an entry point there. The other one is working for a ICS security focused consulting business. So like the services side of Dragos or other similar folks who provide these sorts of maybe defensive and offensive ICS assessments. The third one, and where I think I think this is the most valuable place to start if you want to get into ICS security, especially like from if you're literally just starting out your journey, is to work for an asset owner, asset operator. So I've been pen testing for 11 years. About 5 years into that, I just randomly decided I wanted to go work for an electric utility. I was still doing IT pen testing for almost half of the time I was at that company. But then the metaphorical light bulb went off and I was like, oh my gosh, this matters. This matters at such a deep level. And being in that environment, I was able to like get buy-in from leadership to be like, hey, can we start doing offensive assessments within the substation space, or for these new LNG plants, like that kind of stuff. And the only reason I have ever found myself at Dragos is because of that entry point. So I think that working for an asset owner operator gives you such a boots on the ground, hands-on level of experience where you're actually learning an industry, you're learning the devices and protocols and processes associated with that. So you can think of like electric power, water, rail, or any of those industries. There's some similarities, but they're all so specific. And I'm constantly blown away with my colleagues because we have some of the brightest minds from all of these different industries. And I'm just like, well, I know nothing about that. That's insane. I know a little bit about electric power, but wow, there's so much to learn, and you get such a head start if you're working for an asset owner. So that would be my first bit of advice. My second bit of advice is, yes, focus. If you want to do ICS pen testing, focus on pen testing techniques because they're going to be applicable. And then, like Dark was saying, you're going to unlock the DLC at a certain point where either you have your lab, you have your actual environment if you're an asset owner, or you get to go to customer environments if you're working for a consulting firm. And you get to start applying those kinds of techniques, learning new ones that are, I guess, applicable. I'm being really redundant here. Applicable to industrial control systems.
Oh, no, you're good. Don't mind me. I'm finding a banner that's more appropriate for this.
Oh.
Go ahead.
No, I think there's, doing all of the hack the box stuff, getting your OSCP, doing all the different classes, like that will help you no matter what become an ICS pen tester. The challenge is getting exposure to all of the very specific types of devices and how they communicate, what they're used for, and how they're operated. I'm still on that journey. Like I still feel like a baby in that regard. We were talking about this before hopping on the actual call. It's less imposter syndrome. It's more like, wow, there's just so much out there. I'm going to be a forever student in this realm.
No, it's interesting. Have you ever heard, I know I've heard this phrase come up in my circles a lot, drinking from the fire hose, when you're first joining, when you're first getting into InfoSec. Would you say that that's kind of the same thing with ICS, that it's sort of that nonstop learning?
I absolutely agree with that. And I think to be effective at that in, I guess, cybersecurity in general, to be an effective cybersecurity professional, you need to kind of have that nonstop learning mindset. But yes, same applies in ICS. I don't know if I'd say it's more so. It might be. There's more. It's a niche. It's so much. It's harder to access some of the knowledge. So I think you have to be a little hungrier for it and go searching for it. You have to make it yourself.
ICS is cool.
You have to learn to cook.
Yeah, gotta learn to cook. I definitely would go out on a limb and say, yeah, you guys are definitely that little extra bit of cooler that you got to keep learning. Goodness, I had a question there. Just to make sure that we're getting around to these questions that are coming up here in chat. Let's see. So let's circle back. We're going to go back quite a bit. And thank you, everyone, for your awesome questions in chat. You spoke about resources. And here, let's go ahead. And this is a question that's related to kind of the space that I want to explore. But we'll go ahead and jump to this one quickly, just changing a little bit of gears here. Why do you feel like information about ICS pen testing is so limited? Do you feel that, well, I guess even speaking to that, do you feel that there is limited information? Do you feel that there are resources out there that maybe people don't know about? Could you speak to that?
Yeah, I think on the one hand, there hasn't been a lot of focus throughout, I guess, most of the world on this stuff. I think that critical infrastructure started getting attention maybe 20 years ago. So I think that it's playing catch up in that regard. So from a security perspective, and then if we think about pen testing being a security practice, now we're like 2 abstraction levels deep of just general exposure to the wider world. I think it also goes back to it's hard to get access to these kinds of devices. Like, yes, you can start just buying them off of eBay, but setting them up and programming them is one thing, but doing so in a manner that actually replicates a real environment is a whole nother thing. And then you kind of need to be asking these engineers and operators that have had 25 to 30 to 40 years of doing this in the field, how it's supposed to be done. So that takes me back to where I was saying, I think it's really valuable to work for an asset owner or a vendor, because you get exposure to this kind of stuff. Other than that, it is very limited. The consulting firms are just going to be, they're working for customers, so they're not publishing a whole lot. They're not going to share all the findings typically.
Well, you don't want to publish your dirty laundry out for everyone to see it. What do you mean?
Yeah, right. And that's not fully the case. I mean, our Volt team will do tons of reports for the public, like looking at Pipe Dream, looking at Frosty Goop, some ICS malware that has come out in the last few years. Like, that does come out, and we do see that really generating, I guess, in my mind, a lot more publicity and a lot more interest, right? And then we have folks like your team, like Hack the Box, actually trying to open this sort of stuff up to all folks at an entry point level. And then I see who is it? You need to chat with someone in chat. Was saying they have a lot harder.
Yeah.
ICS. You wrap him into this, but him or her, them wrap them in. I think that it takes the community being interested, and then we all start working together, and then it starts expanding. There are classes. I have a couple of those. So I'm sure a lot of y'all go to Black Hat. You should, if you're interested in ICS pen testing, there's a class called Accessing and Exploiting Industrial Control Systems, I believe is the correct title. I'll drop a link. Doc, do you want me to just give that to you?
Yeah, if you don't mind putting that, you can put it in our private chat, the stage chat there, and then I can copy it in there. I don't think you have permissions to post those links, so I can post those in there for you. But that way
I'll send it to you. This
is
a really good class, I think, and I don't believe that there is a lot of this really available to the public. You have SANS, which is very expensive, very good course material, very expensive. You have some of these specialized classes like Justin's AECS class that I just posted. You don't really have a lot of good, just kind of open source, generally available knowledge, because it's either behind vendor paywalls, not paywalls, but like the vendor castle, or it's in an actual high stakes operating environment. That's a long rambling answer to one. I think it's a niche and it's hard to get access to it in general, and two, general interest hasn't been there up until recently. And so I see this changing. I do see ICS pen testing becoming more widely available. I know there are other organizations working on building out training courses too.
No, that was perfect. Thank you. Hey, a wandering conversation, a wandering answer is great. I appreciate the time you took to explore the historical context here. And there's a number of points that I want to pull out of this. Particularly, you mentioned eBay, and we're going to come back to that when we talk about home labbing. Just because, yeah, that's too exciting not to talk about. Now, you mentioned one of my trap cards here. You said those cool people at Hack the Box, and well, those cool people as well. Oh, thanks. Ah, shucks. Well, those cool people as well over at Dragos have also helped us on making something mighty cool pretty recently. And if you don't mind, I'd like to take just a moment to talk about the awesome work that you and everyone else has done with the Alchemy Pro Lab. Yeah, would you mind briefly just speaking to that? Just honestly brag about it. Just the cool work that you and DIOGT and the others have done in content. Yeah.
Well, Hack the Box and Dragos collaborated. I'll make it real short. I think you might be able to speak to this better than I. we collaborated to build out a big new lab, and it is, you know, how we were talking about moving from corporate to through the DMZ to a place where you can access and impact an industrial control system. It's effectively like a whole built out lab on Hack the Box. That you get to do that. You get to follow that kill chain all the way through, and you get to manipulate PLCs at the end and cause impact. So that's really all I have to say about it. I will be completely honest. I have not done it, so you guys can all go and have fun and tell me how it goes. I have been in a lot of the channels on the development, and I know that it is really well done. I know that everybody who has contributed to it has been thoroughly excited, and I think this is a really impressive and exciting kind of jumping off point to start to kind of peel back that issue of why information about ICS pen testing is so limited. So big kudos to Hack the Box for presenting this to the community, and I hope you all play in it.
Heck yeah. No, thank you. Emma beat me to it. Thank you, Emma. She posted a link in chat to our blog post about this awesome lab. No, you did a great job speaking to that. I can tell you, yeah, no, it's cool. I've taken a peek at it myself, and I'm excited. It's very cool to see what everyone's done. Like you mentioned, the actual impact at the end, being able to make things kind of go boom, you know, digitally go boom. That's fun. That's very cool. No, thank you for taking a moment to brag about that. I just wanted to make sure that we just got that in there. Heck yeah. Anyone, if you have questions in chat, feel free to check that out. I did want to talk about, so let's see. I'll go ahead and hide that. Sort of on a related note, I wanted to talk about resources, things that Dragos or other resources that you know that are out there, anything that you'd recommend. Have you, so I know we've talked briefly about this. Are there any resources in particular from Dragos, whether it be the blog or a YouTube channel or otherwise, that you'd recommend, especially for someone that's getting started?
I'll send another link. So I've been talking a lot about the ICS cyber kill chain. I think that's your foundation for being able to structure what you're going to be doing from ICS pen testing. So that'll be one link I'll share in our private chat. You can share with the rest of folks.
Thank you.
Justin Searles, let me go to control things. So that earlier training link, there's a whole bunch of really good resources.
Is this link chat? I just put it in there.
Oh gosh, let me find my.
Yeah, no, thank you for digging perfect. Those up.
Here is one more.
I know I personally love all of the training and resource links. That it feels like I walk away from a presentation with a whole bundle of just goodie bag of candy and whatnot. This is all these things I get to go and look up. Thank you for pulling that up, though.
So those would be resources. I think I want to shout out Justin again on. So Justin Searle, he runs Control Things. For everybody, I saw a lot of questions about like Nmap scanning in industrial control system environments. Justin has a little document there on that resources page that kind of goes into depth on how to do it safely and what the pros and cons of each flag, each kind of approach are. That is something when we get new pen testers at Dragos, that's like one of the first things I will send to them. Because the question is, how do you enumerate in an environment if you're trying to tiptoe and not knock anything over? It's a lot of learning, I guess, how to tiptoe correctly and where to tiptoe. When I say that, I'm meaning like maybe it's safer to scan for 4445 and 3389 because you know that that's going to be a Windows box and it's not going to. Typically, a PLC is not listening on that. But even more so, you should have a really good scope list and asset inventory so you know exactly what you're touching. That's back to planning. You know, I missed a big thing in the planning, and that's the RFI. So if we roll back about an hour to how a typical engagement, the planning, the prep for that, the other big part of it, so we do assumed breach That's skips initial access. That means we have a user account and a foothold in the environment. We also do white box pen testing, which means we have as much information as the customer can provide to us. And I think that's critical in a OT in pen test engagement, because that's going to give you your asset inventory. It's going to give you your network diagrams. It's going to give you your firewall configs, all that kind of stuff that helps you, one, again, efficiency, but here, even more so, safety is the critical thing. So you know what subnets have the PLCs, what subnets are just hosting kind of the DMZ type patching servers or jump hosts and stuff like that. So you know what you can scan and what you can't, or what you shouldn't.
On that note, since we were talking about scanning, we're going to be oddly specific here for just a moment. Are there any Nmap scans or any particular scans, maybe a scanner that isn't Nmap, that you use when you're interacting with these ICS systems?
Well, a scanner that isn't Nmap, I will typically say is PowerShell. If we are in an environment where I can't install Nmap, we will use PowerShell. Testnet connection, go back all the time. If the question is like, do you use mass scan? Absolutely not. And I think the key for Nmap is the TAC ST. Let me make sure I'm saying this correctly and not looking like a fool on here. But you want to make sure you're closing your connections after that. So that's one of the big issues with older PLCs, like 30-year-old devices, is they can't handle a connection that is opened and then just left hanging, right? Those are the kind of contextual clues, the items.
I no, just appreciating this as a pen tester as well, how much by the seat of your pants a lot of this is, because that's just what a lot of this ends up being, where it's a, how do I talk about this for this audience to make it work out?
Yeah, I think a lot of, like, my other favorite, I guess, scanner will be a web browser. If I can't get Nmap in there and I am just trying to enumerate, I'm like, I have some IPs and I think they might be control devices. Typically, they all have a web browser that typically gives you a lot of control. That's pretty safe to just open up in Chrome or Edge or whatever you want, and then you don't have to scan at all. You're just like informed guessing at that point.
Are you worried about being caught when you do that, though? I guess maybe let's take a step back. Are you ever worried about being caught when you are doing these pen tests? Are you trying to test detection in that way?
We're trying to test detection in that we want the SOC to see what we did, and we want to make sure that they have an ability to detect and respond to that. So that's where we kind of trend towards a little bit of purple teaming. We're not worried about evading detection. That goes back to the conversation about learning how to talk to the customer and say, this doesn't serve you, and it handcuffs us. So no, I'm typically not worried about that. If I am, it's usually for the first 1 or 2 days, and we try and be really sneaky and evade. And then at one point I'm like, well, let's let them catch us, and we can have the conversation and get it over with, and then actually do what's useful for them.
Do you find, is that something that you even really try to have on reports, or is that something that you find that it's just not really pertinent to the pen test itself?
It depends on what the customer wants. Sometimes they want to be testing the SOC and they want detection, like even screenshots in there. If you're doing a full purple team engagement, then yes, it is. That is the whole focus, right? So that will be each of your, we have this technique. Did you detect it? What are the artifacts, etc. We do try and wrap that into what we call the attack timeline section of our reports. So we'll do an executive summary. We'll do a technical summary. So exec summary should be a 1-page kind of tear off high level. Report writing for pen test is hard. I think that's one of the underrated skills. So back to someone else's question a while ago, how do you get started in ICS pen testing? Learn to write a really good report. Learn how to communicate effectively. But our reports will go through kind of the technical summary of scope, purpose, environment overview, and then we get into what is the narrative before we do the findings. And the narrative is laid out according to that kill chain. So step 1, Dragos did this. Step 2, Dragos did this. Step 3, Dragos did that. That's where I like to include those detection notes. So we did this, it got us here, this allowed the next step. And the customer saw us at step 2, 3, and 5 and responded at each of those. They didn't necessarily cut our access, but for leadership or for the SOC or for those teams, that's a really good way of, one, proving that you are worth the money, that you're being effective, and your SOC should keep being funded. They're doing a good job. I think it's really important in a pen test report to talk up the wins, not just the issues.
Did you want to speak a little bit more to that? Go ahead. Yeah, here, go ahead.
I want to roll back to one other comment I saw that was super on point. So Mark said, better passively network scanning with span ports. I would agree. I think that if you have access to a span port, or you have a shark tap or something like that, and you're in an ICS network and you can just kind of sit there and sniff, that's probably just as effective. Wireshark would be my other network scanner, right? Like, you're not scanning, but you're sitting there and you're listening. And a lot of industrial protocols are, oh gosh, help me out. What's the word? They're very verbose. They're talking to everybody on the network.
Yeah.
See, this is where I feel like an idiot, because I forget the simple terms.
Well, I mean, I guess that speaks to how far, like, you are kind of the translation of your skills from just normal pen testing to be beyond that second level, where
broadcast is the word. Thank you, John McSayer.
Yeah. No, I mean, it speaks to the depth there. And I mean, it's a cool thing, though, that it is that complex in that way. Not to speak to complexity for the sake of complexity. We were talking about how they're very verbose. Those protocols.
One other quick comment.
Yeah.
Jason, learn to be confident. And this is advice for becoming a pen tester, I believe, right, Jason? But OT environments have a lot of people that don't like tech, so they will fight you a lot. I think learning how to be a little bit of a relationship therapist, like being really self-aware about how you interact with people, but then being able to mediate between the OT folks on the one side of house and the IT security folks on the other side of house, and kind of be a buffer and a calm down point for both parties is really important. IT security will often come in and be like, we have all these policies, you got to do it like this, do this, this, and this. And OT folks are like, well, that breaks process, that we can't access our systems. We're the ones making the business money. We've been doing this for 40 years. Who are you to tell us this? You don't even understand what's going on in this environment. So I think learning how to navigate those kinds of pretty intense situations is a really, really crucial skill for all ICS cybersecurity practitioners. But as a pen tester, I find that we're in a unique position often because we get to kind of prove the things. And sometimes that proves IT security's point. Sometimes that proves OT security's point. I think an interesting example of this is, like, when we look at some of these protocols, they're unauthenticated and unencrypted. They can support authentication and encryption, but typically they don't. The knee-jerk reaction for all of us who have been in IT security is, hey, let's throw encryption on that protocol so no one can do anything with it. However, that breaks the ability for operators to understand what's going on in the environment. That breaks their ability to troubleshoot if something is going wrong. Visibility is super key. And we can talk about that in a little while. I think we'll find our way there. But I think that's one really good example of needing to push back against a common assumption from IT security that can't be well applied in OT security.
Don't mind me, I'm just taking a note so we go back to that encryption. I guess you mentioned a lot this buffer and the importance of I guess having some give, or proving these things out and seeing how this works in practice. Earlier you spoke towards communication. You made the comment of learn how to communicate. Do you want to speak to that and how that communication can help in these challenging situations, or with what you would deal with in your daily work balance? I guess just trying to think of a good term to capture that.
I think being able to communicate verbally to customers is really key, and to be able to do so while probably struggling with feeling like you're not making the progress you want to be making in your engagement. That's something that I find I run into a lot. This week is a good example of that. So being able to pull yourself back from being like super technically focused and be like, okay, let me figure out how to talk about what we've done at a digestible level for the folks that I'm working for, I think is crucial. So verbal communication, but I think written communication is super key too. So understanding what context to include in a pen test report. Being like taking good screenshots. I think maybe I'm a stickler, maybe it's just aesthetics, but I think that how you present something is really, really, really important. Even if it's the same screenshot, but you've got like a couple edges of another window compared to just a cropped like command line screenshot. I think that is far more effective. And we might be going off track here, but
no, I was actually going to take you back to that comment because this is something that's often overlooked. Do you want to talk about the importance of screenshots and good screenshots? I know you briefly talked about cropping. I don't know if there's anything more you want to explore there. That's an issue that I'm willing to die on that hill, at least personally.
Let's I think not just screenshots, but good notes are the critical thing. And so I want to be including a timestamp. I want to be including the target, the source, what action I did, the command I ran, and a screenshot. We have a template built out in Obsidian that we just kind of hotkey. So anytime we do something that's significant, a significant action, which I think is something that affects a state change in the environment or something that contributes to the pen test objectives, those things all need to be documented. For the state change things, so you can go back and roll back any changes you made. And for the kill chain kind of stuff, that's so that you know what you're including in the pen test report. In the screenshot, I also would like to see the context as to what host this was ran on. So if you have room in your command prompt host name, and again, this gets us into, we're not trying to evade detection, we're trying to document a vulnerability and how it can be abused or leveraged or exploited to have a certain effect. So be as verbose as possible. Do host name, IP address, run your command, show your proof, all that kind of stuff. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, no, I appreciate the thoroughness that you explored that, just because there are multiple facets of, a lot of people think of them as just basic, a screenshot's boring. What's in a screenshot? But no, thank you for taking time to explore that. I did want to talk about, so I don't know if this is something that Dragos would have, or a resource you would be aware of. Are there any sample ICS or other pen test reports that you really like? A good example that you would say, a new pen tester, hey, go look at this. This is a good report to use. This is what you should be using to work off of.
I know we have a sample report, but I think it's for customers.
Yeah, and that's okay.
I don't know if I can share that.
Yeah.
I want here, let's roll back again. Bless Justin Searle. I know one thing I would refer a lot of folks to is his NES Core pen test methodology. It's a little bit older. It's in the link that Dark shared to the controlthings.io / for resources page.
Let me copy that and add again.
That has, well, I'm just going to pull it up real quick.
Yeah.
It's so well done and so in depth. And this is honestly a bit different than the Dragos flavor of pen testing. I think this is more of a device focused or truly just pen testing, not adversary mindset pen testing. But that would be a good resource as a reference point there. For reports, I don't know if I have an answer for you.
No, that's perfect. Well, even then, I pulled up the NESCOR guide to penetration testing from that link. Everything that's under that resources page, I'm just blown away by how thorough and how well documented this is here. So, no, thank you for providing that resource. I know that I don't mean to make you pull another resource out of your hat, but yeah, no, thank you for speaking to that. Was there anything else you wanted to speak on with regards to reports or anything like that, communication? Otherwise, we can go back towards visibility and encryption. You had mentioned that you wanted to speak about that.
I think it's important with reports to give your customers a few weeks to digest them and maybe practice the humility enough to be wrong about stuff. Like, make sure you're right before you deliver your report, but let the customer correct you because they know their environment far more than you do. And you'll probably learn something, and then the information will be correct for them. And remember that the report is probably being used as leverage to assist them in some way. So that's why you're doing what you're doing. It's not just, hey, it's not about us as pen testers. That's the thing we have to shake every single day. It's not about our successes or failures as pen testers. It's how we help the customer and how we help secure that environment. I think that's my last comment on the report.
No, that's perfect. Thank you. Did you want to jump to visibility and encryption, or did you want to bounce to another topic next?
I have one quick comment. Ryan mentioned the guy who made that resource teaches/made the Black Hat course also. Yeah, Justin Searle teaches at Black Hat. He teaches for SANS. I saw Jason actually mention there's so Justin, I think, teaches SANS 410. Excellent class. Go take it if you can convince your company to pay for it. Go take his Black Hat course. You'll also meet, I think you'll meet Todd if you go to Black Hat and do that class. Amazing individual. One of my mentors. I just have to give him a shout out. SANS is coming out with ICS 613, which is penetration testing in ICS environments. I forget the actual title, but it's an ICS pen testing class that is forthcoming. So yeah, some little shout outs for Justin. He's an excellent contributor to the community.
Heck yeah. Yeah, no, shout outs like that are perfect. And that's one thing to keep in mind, Tyler, if you have any other shout outs that you want to throw out there, just let me know.
Sounds good.
Let me go ahead and let's see.
I would assume 613 is going to come with a cert, but I don't work for SANS. I can't answer that question.
There we go. Just pull that one up briefly so people can see the question. There we go. No, awesome. Let's see. Let me go ahead. And I wanted to briefly, this is admittedly a question that I had, but I know that would probably come up with the audience. Internships. Would you be able to speak to Dragos internships or even ICS internships in general?
I know we have an internship program. I don't think I have much more insight to speak about that, so I apologize for not being prepared.
No, that's okay. I realize I'm very much putting you on the spot with that. Internships are just cool, and I figured we'd talk about it.
I think internships are cool and pursue them wherever you have the opportunity. I would look for, again, I'll shout out the local electric utilities. Like there's a lot of ICS security roles, I think, open at throughout the nation, the world, that are kind of more entry level. And I think that's where folks should really start. And a lot of those organizations probably do have internship programs as well. But yeah, go work for an asset owner, go work for a consulting firm, go work for an OT technology firm, go work for a vendor.
On that note, for the asset owner, and just as a heads up, I did put one question for you in our chat. When it comes to the asset owner, you had mentioned sort of asking to evaluate these resources. Would you say that asking to evaluate resources, was that helpful? Is that something that you think other people should do if they're, like, for example, working for a city or are already in that asset owner position?
Can you restate that?
Yeah. So that sort of that asking part is what I was focusing on. That actual bringing up of, hey, we should do a pen test on this. Hey, I'm concerned about the security of this item. Do you think it's worthwhile for someone that's newer to bring that up and say, hey, I think we should be looking at this? Or do you think it's something that maybe wait for the asset owner themselves to say, no, I'm ready to do this pen test. I'm ready to look at this and evaluate my security on this?
That's a good question. And I think my answer is it probably depends on your relationship with the asset owner.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think it's effective to go be like, hey, I'm a pen tester. I want to pen test your LNG import terminal. They're going to be like, no, definitely not. I think that if you're internal into the company, this is where my mind is going. This was a proud moment and a big win from my time at the electric utility, was first building out the pen test program, then building out the internal red team program, then making it kind of an always on pen testing, red teaming approach where it's just always collaborative with our SOC and our IR team and my team. So anytime any of us had concerns, we were like, okay, well, Tyler, can you go prove it? And then we'll see what we can do to detect it and mitigate it. And it's just a constantly flowing cycle. I found that to be a really effective approach. And I think that's getting towards what you're saying of bringing up concerns. So figure out how to build a process internally for expediting those concerns. I found that more effective for boosting, or I guess safeguarding, the security of that organization than planning and scoping individual application pen tests on a yearly basis. That kind of always on approach and just being like, hey, I think this might be an issue. Let's go figure it out. Really positive. But that's something you can really only do if you're internal. I don't think you should be doing that. I don't think any of us should be bug bountying industrial control system operators. I think that's a really good way to break shit and cause a lot of issues. Don't do it. Like, don't take that approach. Get a job with them and start talking to them. Jason's got another good point.
Here, let me go and pull this up.
I do agree with you, and I think that the physical aspect of red teaming, that kind of initial access to the site, is a crucial part of ICS security, and it's something we definitely don't do enough or at all. And from the Dragos perspective, I would like to see more of it, because often when you get on sites, some industries, so like electric power, you have all of the NERC regulation very mature. Some others, like wastewater, water treatment plants, or lumber manufacturing, they do not have a lot of physical security, and you can jump into their process control network through the cabinet that's at the gatehouse that's unlocked. So I think that is accurate, Jason. What I would like to see, and it goes back to how do we do an effective pen test within a certain amount of time? That's where it's really important to define what your goals and objectives are, what your constraints are, and to talk to customers about being like, this approach does not cover the initial access side of things. We're doing assumed breach. You may have blind spots. Yeah, SneakerNet, walk it in.
Yeah. Here, I'll pull up that SneakerNet comment just for a moment. So on that note of physical security, is that something I apologies if I missed this. Is that something that comes up a lot in reports? Do you find that often enough your report has to highlight this because it is that big of an issue?
I think in what we call cybersecurity assessments or architecture reviews, it'll be a finding that's more prevalent. In our cases, we're often not worried about that at all because we have our assumed breach foothold either on Corp or in the DMZ or in the PCN. And we're looking at what someone with network access can do from there. So for pen test reports, no. For other types, yes.
Do you find, well, I guess on a related note, do you find yourself often recommending that clients, either if they're interested in this or just something that you voice, that they work with people that are known for physical security or testing those mechanisms? Do you find that it's that big of an issue that it comes up testing that actual service? I could explain that again if you want.
I'm sorry. Can you, run me through that one more time? I keep on reading comments and listening to you.
Yeah, I know. Curse you, chat. You're giving us really good questions and comments.
Yeah, we're gonna full screen us. You and me now.
Yeah, no, you're good. What I'm getting at is if you were to go to an engagement and a client were to bring up, we're concerned about our physical security, like say they had listened to like a talk by Deviant Ollam or another person that is known for physical security, do you find that when this comes up, are you recommending that, hey, go work with folks that specialize in this, or is it a big enough issue that you preempt that and even say, hey, we don't do physical security testing here. If you want to work on this, we recommend working with some other folks. Not to like say, oh, you recommend these other vendors, but is that issue coming up of physical security?
Some of the folks on the team have that kind of experience. So I can think of a couple engagements where, for example, we're working in a lab and we're doing a lot of actual device manipulation. So we're taking open source libraries and messing with stuff to cause like downstream effects for process control. That customer asked us, they were like, okay, well, it seems like as long, kind of to Jason's point, if you can get network access, which means you just have to get past the badge readers, can you take a look at the badge readers? And so we did kind of pivot that into a device teardown and some RFID hacking and NFC stuff. That's just not the priority focus of the team.
Not the norm.
And I am probably one of the first people to always to be like, hey, if this is like, I do not want to make you sleep well at night having done a shoddy job. So yes, if it's something where it's like, we don't have the expertise, pass it on down. I don't have a list of, recommended other vendors, but I will talk folks through, here's what you need to look for. Yeah.
No, thank you for talking to that. Just kind of an interesting tangent, just to see. I know with other pen testing, random things like that can pop up. I did want to briefly call out ICS, heavy metal hacking, all that's getting a lot of love in chat. Just getting some call out for your industry and the sector of hacking that you work in. Thank you everyone for the call outs, all the love coming out in chat. Heck yeah. Let's see. We did have one other question that had come in that I wanted to get to. So let's see. There's one we'll get to here in a moment. Do you know of any misconceptions about ICS pen testing? To more fully state that, what would you say is the biggest misconception about ICS pen testing today, or just in the industry itself?
Well, let me think of a real answer, but my gut check answer is it's glamorous and it's really fun all the time. And it's I don't know. I think anyone who is an actual pen tester, you start to realize that it's not all glitz and glamour. It's a lot of beating your head against the wall. And we're effectively, I think the big thing that folks, especially coming into pen testing, not just ICS pen testing, need to kind of start to understand is, you're not this rock star. You're not this elite hacker. You have very niche skills, yes, but it's not about you. You're effectively a QA consultant. You're just validating that things have been deployed and configured properly. we talk about red team and blue team. We talk about doing offensive security. Everyone who's not working for like federal agencies or the military in offensive operations is blue team. Let's just all just kind of take a little ego check, and we're all here just doing a little bit of QA on all these systems. So that's where my mind went initially. Is it's super fun, but it's also not glamorous, and it's not about you.
No, thank you. The gut check answer. Honestly, that's what I'm going for. That's what I want. It's the real answer. So no, that's perfect. I admittedly want to steer the conversation back towards one question in particular. I want to talk about home labbing, and admittedly, this is a selfish want, just because you mentioned. Let's just say I'm a fine purveyor of random crap from eBay, and you've alluded to this. You've mentioned that people can buy fun things on eBay or buy these things and start setting up a home lab. How would you recommend someone start a home lab or get started in this space if they wanted to test this out at home?
This actually, I think, goes back to why it's so hard to find easy information about this. Is you can't really virtualize a lot of this stuff. You're working with physical devices. You can virtualize some of it, yes, but not a lot. So you actually have to have the space, you have to have the money, you have to have the expertise to deploy it all and deploy it correctly. I don't have a home lab. I think we were chatting. I was joking about this when we met up last week, but I'm traveling. I'm a big traveler. I don't have gear set anywhere. I'm literally working off a laptop right now. I am very, very lucky though that Dragos has an incredible lab with like just devices from every industry racked and stacked, and I can access that from everywhere. I do think that, gosh, find the things that interest you. So if you want to, I remember colleagues buying a bunch of Caterpillar devices for autonomous mining rigs. Like, find something neat. You can look at really. Oh, go ahead.
Oh no, autonomous mining operate for just out of nowhere. Just next thing I feel like you're going to say is, oh yeah, let's just grab like a space shuttle control panel or like a crane control panel.
You could probably find it. I challenge you to do a little Google search right now, an eBay search. I bet find the interesting things and then start. Actually, this kind of takes into another thing, a misconception about ICS pen testing is a lot of your time is spent a little bit reverse engineering what's going on with these devices. So you're reverse engineering the system of systems, the process, the protocols, and maybe even the software too sometimes. So this is lots of just reading vendor documentation, just reading user manuals, and searching through the 7th version of a user manual till you find the Modbus register map that lets you see what register applies to what, I guess, function on that device. That's where it gets not glamorous. You're like, oh, shoot, I'm back at just reading Excel spreadsheets with 65,000 lines. Nice. But yeah, for home lab setup, I saw a comment about Ignition as a SCADA platform. Yes, absolutely. I'm going to use this as a tangent into this idea of bring your own HMI. This is something Todd taught me. So again, Todd bless you. There are a couple, there's either VT SCADA, which is a vendor package for, there's a community version, so much like we have Burp Suite Community. There's a HMI that you can install and run, and you only have a certain amount of set points you can read. That's super useful for once you've been in a network and you see what kind of traffic is going, then you can start building kind of a heads up display of like, what are these devices doing? There's a GitHub project with I think a Dockerized version of this too. So in some cases, you don't have to buy the super expensive vendor software. There are workarounds. You can use cracked software if you lean that way. I think when you're setting up a home lab, try and start setting it up according to the Purdue model. So set up remote access. Treat your home network as the corporate environment. Set up a DMZ, set up a file transfer server between the two, set up a jump host, do all the things to make it as close to a true OT environment, especially kind of dialed for the industry that you're interested in. Like, for example, the mining stuff. You can buy RTUs from Schweitzer if you're interested in electric, RTACs and RTUs. Start exploring that kind of stuff.
Now,
Rolf,
you've mentioned.
go ahead.
No, go ahead. Absolutely.
One quick aside. Rolf asked us a couple times if wireless is often included in testing. Not currently. At the electric utility, that's part of NERC regulation, is to check and see if there is rogue wireless. So sometimes, yes. I think you asked earlier also about Zigbee and RF and other protocols like that. When we do device pen tests of, let's say, an AMI meter or the smart meters, that will be in scope. So that there are aspects of that. And I think that's a very fascinating aspect of where you can take ICS pen testing. My primary focus is that objective-based network pen test. But what I find most fascinating is the hardware pen testing that you're referring to.
Yeah. Now, on that note, you've mentioned a lot of these exotic spaces, and even just now talking about some of the exciting areas that ICS can go. When you're looking at this, or I guess in your experience, what are some of the fun things or some of the places that you've ended up with ICS that maybe you didn't expect to be there, or different parts of the industry that you were able to explore?
I think some of my highlights were mining was fascinating. Like we are at a control center thousands and thousands of miles away from the actual mine site, with access to the GPS of the trucks and watching the trucks move around, and no one's there. There's like one operator there. That was fascinating to understand and realize how remote the remote operations of those kinds of environments are, or those operations. Another really interesting one was doing kind of network and device pen testing of subsea equipment. So oil rig drills, that kind of stuff. That's fascinating things. I love the electric power industry. That's where I kind of got my roots. And I think that's one of for me, why I love it so much is it's the baseline of all the critical infrastructure, powers everything else. It's the biggest system on the planet. I'm trying to think of other interesting ones. Data centers have been really interesting too, because we don't typically consider those. I mean, I think we're kind of having a little bit of a semantic reckoning in the industry right now. Like, is it OT or is it not? And there's process control. It's using industrial protocols. It's supporting all of the other infrastructure that supports a business operations. And it's like the Azure stacks or the Google Cloud stacks, like all of that kind of stuff. We rely on that on a day-to-day basis. Seems like critical infrastructure to me. Those are really fun because they're a slightly different flavor of a lot of these protocols. So there's power in there, but it's not like electric power, like transmission, distribution, generation. It's more like building automation and electric power management. So you get to apply similar techniques to slightly different devices and use cases. I find that really, really fascinating.
No, that's yeah. No, if you don't mind, I'd like to continue on that thought. We had an awesome question. This is one that was submitted before the interview rather. This one reads, ICS security often deals with legacy systems that weren't built with security in mind. What's the most innovative approach you've seen or developed to bridge the gap for older systems and modern needs?
I think this gets us back to the encryption discussion that you were kind of trying to drive us towards earlier. I don't think that there's, and maybe this is, what's the word I'm looking for? This is a byproduct of me working at Dragos, because I think this is kind of the Dragos byline in that we don't need new ICS security solutions. There's not a lot of, what we need is focus on the architecture, focus on education, focus on funding to, I guess, enhance all of this, the security of critical infrastructure. I think one of the big solutions that I wouldn't say is novel right now, but it's what Dragos does, so it was novel at one point, is passive network visibility and monitoring. And I think that solves a lot of these problems. So the solution isn't to put encryption on Modbus or on OPC UA, because you lose all of the benefits of having an unencrypted protocol, all the troubleshooting, all the easy access for operators, all that kind of stuff. But there's a way to still mitigate the risk and look and notice if something is happening. And this can apply both for, let's say, IT devices and OT devices. So I think network visibility and monitoring is kind of that solution that bridges the gap for the older systems and the modern needs, right? So we can't just go out and replace or upgrade a lot of these protocols. Like, even if your company did decide to go with Modbus Secure or DMP3 TLS encrypted or OPC UA with encryption, there might be issues connecting those devices to other legacy devices that don't support the new latest things. And these things can't just be taken down and patched and pulled in and out. They might be hundreds of feet below the sea. They might be thousands of miles away from you in a mine. How do you solve that problem? You get eyes on it. You get situational awareness, and you can see if something is happening. So I think the network visibility is that innovative approach. And again, I might be parroting a Dragos byline, but aside from maybe secure remote access technologies, there's not a lot of other things that we think are super necessary at the moment, aside from doing the basics. So that takes us back to the SANS 5 critical controls, which is, I think I shared with you, I may not. But effectively, those things are, we talked about an OT specific incident response plan is kind of the baseline. What do you do when something goes wrong? Who has the authority to act? What is your plan, et cetera, et cetera. The second one is defensible architecture. So have you architected your environment in a way where there's good segmentation? There is zones of kind of like demarcation zones where functional applications reside. So we're thinking patching servers sit in the DMZ, but we don't need everything to be talking across the DMZ. There's maybe only a few things. You have good segmentation according to Purdue, whatever. Is your architecture gonna result in an adversary or a pen tester like me having a bad day? Like, are we gonna struggle to move through your environment, or is it going to be easy because it's flat? There's no segmentation, and you reuse the same local administrator password on all your boxes.
What do you mean that never happens?
It's starting to happen less and less, and it's frustrating to run into, but that's why I think that the more focus we have on the industry and the more I guess effective security assessments that get funding for the teams who are doing the architecture development and who are managing these systems, that's how we solve the problems. It's back to, again, what Hack the Box is doing by deploying this lab, is giving more visibility to the industry and the problems that it faces. And that's how we solve it. It's not always a new technology that's going to fix the thing. Sometimes it's just more awareness and focus.
Yeah, no, go ahead.
Well, I see Jason says asset inventory. Yes, you're absolutely right. I've gotten to the third of the 5 critical controls, which is network visibility and monitoring. That is what lets you build your asset inventory, right? So we're trying to move from having an asset inventory in Excel or SAP where it's manual and you're going through and you're writing all this stuff down. If you're doing asset inventory through a passive network monitoring tool, you're going to see everything that's actually talking on the network. There's not going to be something hidden in a cabinet somewhere else that you've missed. It also lets you get really good view into what protocols are being spoken, whether there are concerns about exploits against a certain type of programmable logic controller or vendor software or an outdated Windows system. So the visibility and monitoring solves so many of these problems, and it enables the solutions for so many others. Fourth one will be secure remote access. So we're looking at things like making sure you have MFA applied for all external access into your environment. But I would argue, as a pen tester who hates to see MFA, apply it everywhere where there's some sort of boundary traversal. Do that and use secondary accounts. That's the other big one. I guess that's part of defensible architecture. So we want separate IT and OT Active Directory domains for sure, but we also want a little bit of separation between, I guess this is just role-based access control and concept of least privilege. You guys all know that. I'll leave that there. Risk-based vuln management is the 5th of what we call the 5 critical controls. And why we say risk-based is, and that's kind of goes back to this approach we take with OT pen testing at Dragos. Context matters. There's hundreds of thousands of vulnerabilities in every environment. And I see in this environment, it's no different. However, we can't patch all of those. Sometimes there aren't even patches from a vendor. Sometimes this protocol is 30 years old and the person who developed it has retired and lives in the Bahamas or maybe has passed. Who knows? Sometimes patching it means that you run into issues with the rest of your environment. So it's not just, hey, there's a vulnerability, got to patch it within 30 days. Doesn't work. Prioritizing the ones that matter and understanding whether there are ways to mitigate the vulnerability without necessarily patching. It's a much more appropriate response there.
No, thank you. I was thinking through that. You commented at one point talking about MFA on these systems, and I wanted to take us back to that. When we're talking about these legacy systems, and let me go ahead and pull this banner down. When we're talking about these legacy systems and you are looking at applying MFA, do you find that a lot of these older systems do actually support MFA being enabled? Do you find that this is, well, I know that it's not necessarily you installing this. Do you find that more often than not, you're able to update these systems in that way?
I don't think industrial systems often support it. We're talking jump hosts, we're talking about VPNs, we're talking about the ways that operators are going to get into the environment remotely. We're talking about maybe the engineering workstations they're on. So can you use like an additional authentication factor? And yes, that is built into a lot of these remote access solutions. But no, you're not going to find that on most controllers. Absolutely not.
No, thank you for talking to that. Just kind of an interesting little court question, just with encountering such old technology and with what you're dealing with today. You know, I always think that, encountering like mainframes and some of these older systems, you see a Windows 7 box on the network and you think, oh, this is old as dirt. I'm sure you're thinking, actually, just a fun question. Just spitballing, what do you think the oldest system is that you've ever interacted with? Like something from like, I don't even know.
I don't know. I think this was from the 70s. It was for a oil and gas. Well, it was a petroleum manufacturer. Mm-hmm. And I think it was custom built back. Like it was special for that plant. It looked like the control panels on the 70s Star Wars, like in the Star Destroyers and the Death Star, like just paper displays, paper routing diagrams and stuff, backlit with like actual, not LED, what's the incandescent bulbs. And it straight up looked like you were on the Death Star. That's probably the oldest system. I'm going to give it a 70s, mid 70s age.
That's just wild. Have you ever been working on something and think, this is older than I am? What am I doing touching this?
Right. And that's the really interesting and sometimes nerve-wracking part, is because we come into environments and we're supposed to be the experts, right? But it's like, there's no way you'll ever be the expert.
Yeah. Well,
John over here has been working on this system for 45 years. Like,
yeah, yeah, here, go ahead.
Oh no, I don't think I have anything else there. I do have MK raised a good question. If we can pivot.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Are you looking at the conducted tests on the fly? Yep, perfect. Absolutely.
That's a lovely question.
Here, I can go ahead and read that one. Okay. Just to read it in full for everyone, anyone who might be listening. MK asks, have you ever conducted tests without access to your orthodox testing tools and had to resort to on-the-fly tool scripting or living on the land, anything like that?
So we've talked about living off the land for a little bit, and that's using like built-in like Windows binaries, all that kind of stuff. A really key concept I think ICS pen testers should take to heart is kind of the same thing, but we call it built-in functionality. So that exists in ICS protocols, that exists in ICS software. There's all these things that can be taken advantage for that can have a different effect than what they're used for. So we think of maybe a denial of service situation where there's an ability to reset a password by just writing to a Modbus register. Then you've locked all of the operators out. You can change some other registers, make things go bad. You lock all the other operators out, and you have to roll trucks to reprogram it. Or worst case scenario, we've come across, this is in building automation, HVAC controllers. You can actually just send a command to drop the network interface card, and then it's offline. You can send that remotely, but you can't do anything else because it's offline at that point, and literally have to roll trucks out there. These are all built in. This is built into the protocol and the device. And sometimes you're like, why does this exist? There's examples of that. I think where I want to take it next is like on the fly tool scripting. One thing, yes, we will use, there's Python libraries for almost every industrial control system protocol out there right now. Not only do we use that, but we see adversaries using that. So when we talk about the pipe dream malware framework or Frosty Goop, a lot of those are based on open source libraries as well. And it's really effective. Like that is the learning curve, because sometimes, well, I'll actually roll that back. The existence of Python libraries is going to help the awareness of this for the community, because it's actually well documented. So as you're trying to build these tools and scripts on the fly, you start to understand the protocol. We do that a lot. We'll do that a lot with these unauthenticated and unencrypted protocols. So yes, I love that. That's something to focus on if you're getting into ICS pen testing, is learning how to do, I don't know if I want to say protocol reverse engineering, but learning how to do network analysis and then getting real comfortable with Python or Go or Rust, building your own tools or scripts. And personally, I like Python for this because you can just run it in VS Code through your terminal and change things on the fly and be manipulating things on the fly and get direct feedback. So for example, with Modbus, you can write basically a console-based HMI, and in your other terminal box, you can have the manipulation going on, and you can see what is happening when you change register values.
Don't mind me. My camera has decided, you know what? We don't need backgrounds for today, so I'm just fixing this. This will take just a second. It's just
good.
My computer just decided all of a sudden, hey, you don't want to use your mic or camera, right? No, it's okay. This is perfect. I'm going to fix it just by reloading the camera itself. No, thank you for speaking to that. Was there anything else you wanted to explore on that topic?
Yeah, I got another little tangent we can go down.
Yeah.
Someone asked about OT-specific pen test frameworks, and I heard chatter that they are in the works, but not fully available. There's Metasploit modules for ICS. There's all sorts of stuff. What I think the interesting thing to think about with that question is, because all of these protocols are now having there's open source libraries and there's more awareness around industrial control systems as a whole, the bar to entry for adversaries is lowering. We're seeing that with the pipe dream malware framework, which is basically like a giant. It has C2 capabilities. It has lateral movement capabilities. It has brute forcing and enumeration capabilities. And it also has controller impact capabilities. All of those things based on effectively open source libraries. Frosty Goop, which was another recent malware that was used to target HVAC in Modbus controllers on the internet in Ukraine, used open source libraries too. And it's actually really interesting. One way we can detect those is because the adversaries, were literally just copying, pasting a full-on like example of how to interact with the code. So instead of typical Modbus, you create a connection, you do all your writes, and you close it. This was like create connection, make a write, close, open another connection, do all this stuff. So it's not that they're experts, it's that they have access to these things now. And when you have capability and intent, that's when it starts to get really dangerous, especially in environments where things are exposed externally on the internet. Back to OT frameworks. That's going to be a scary day. And that's actually something my colleagues and I have researched, and we built some, let's say, Cobalt Strike communication channels so we can use specific ICS protocols as beacon communication channels. We don't want to release that because we don't really want to have everybody in the world able to just go open, like it's an open hunt on the electric industry or on water. We're already seeing that those industries are being targeted. It'll be a bad day when there is an ICS based Cobalt Strike that is just out there and all of us can do whatever we want with it. I would urge you all to do that research and then apply it well. Go work for an asset owner.
Heck yeah, heard it here first. No, I'm almost taken aback, or almost without words, just because I really appreciate the thoroughness that you're answering these questions to. Just as someone that, I have a lot of interest in ICS pen testing, and I'm really happy, just taking a step back, to even be able to have this time to talk to you, and that we get to give ICS, the spotlight that it deserves in this way. Especially as you've been highlighting sort of this rise that we're seeing. On that note, is that something that you're noticing more of? Do you find that there's kind of been an uptick in this focus on ICS attacks, or OT attacks, I should say, rather?
I would say yes. And this is, again, one of the questions I should punt to my Intel colleagues, because I will probably look like a fool if I try and answer it in a lot of detail. But there has been a steady increase in, on the one hand, ransomware targeting industrial control systems, but also targeted attacks, like trying to cause not just a widespread outage, but manipulating a controller to have a physical attack. So Ukraine, with the heat recently, we have the pipe dream framework, which was discovered and researched and kind of released to the public before it was deployed for effect. You have other attacks against Ukraine. They're targeting the electrical grid, shutting power down. You have the recent attack against the Viasat network early on in the Russian-Ukraine war. It is, I think, getting more, there is an upward trend. Dragos will have a lot of good references and actual reports, so you don't have to listen to Tyler stumble all over it. Go look it up. There's a lot of interesting reading if you want to learn more about adversary trends. And yeah, that's awesome. That's my answer. Is my half-assed answer.
No, that's no, that was great. Thank you. On that note, we've covered all of our questions that we had. Chat, everyone in chat, you've provided some awesome questions. Thank you as well to Tyler for the care and attention that you brought to answering those questions from chat. You mentioned resources. You mentioned things for people to learn. Are there any links, just as we're getting ready to wrap up, are there any links that you wanted to start grabbing or tossing in chat? We can get those added in there. And if you wanted to speak to any of those links briefly, I can keep going if you want. Do you want a moment to find those?
Yeah, you should talk about the labs or something while I look some stuff up.
Heck yeah, of course. Oh, no, I'm happy to. Let me go ahead and grab that blog post link again and put this in chat. Yeah. Thank you, everyone in chat. Thank you, MK and everyone. I'm glad y'all were. I think that Emma, myself, and everyone else. Yep, we all got it. Plenty of links. Thank you, everyone. The Alchemy Lab. I can't stress this enough. If you are excited, if this sounds like fun, and this is something you want to go and do, if you thought, hey, those two nerds. Sorry, Tyler. I should say.
I'll take it.
One cool person and then Dark. We're talking about all this cool stuff, and I want to go and try it myself. You got to check out Alchemy. I mean, Tyler, do you think I'm selling it short?
No, I intend to. I just need to find time to sit down and give it its due course. I know that it is very, very in depth. There's a lot to do. It's not like here's your 3-step guide to hacking a brewery. You have to work for it, and it's very realistic in that you move through all the layers. You're going to be starting on corporate. You're going to be trying to figure out how to. You don't even know where you're going when you begin. You're just like, oh, okay, well, now I have this access and I found this weird hint. It's going to take you a day or two to figure out where that even leads. And at the end of it, you are going to be working with ICS protocols, with controllers. Go have fun.
Heck yeah. Tyler, I guess we're wrapping up. Are there any shout outs you wanted to give? Thank you so much for being here. Thank you to Dragos as well for letting us borrow you for a little bit. I really appreciate it.
A couple shout outs. One, mentor Aaron Boyd. I don't know if he's listening, but if he is, I love you, man. And thank you for everything. I know that he's worked a lot with Hack the Box in the past. Todd Keller, Justin Searle. Thank you for everything you do for the community and for everything you've taught me. And then my dear friend Marissa Costa, who I think kind of spurred this chat on, even though she was not able to join here. I want to give her a big shout out. She helps TA Justin's class with Todd at Black Hat. So everybody who wants to learn how to do what we've been talking about should go take that class next year. It'll be a good time.
Absolutely. No, thank you.
I dropped one more link, and this is for the folks who are asking about hardware hacking. I think this is a really good set of classes on how to kind of get into that more device pen testing side of things. So go forth and prosper with all that.
Appreciating.
I'm not really. I don't love social media, but I can share my LinkedIn. If folks have questions, always feel free to just reach out.
Yeah. Just whatever you're comfortable with. Are you comfortable with me posting your LinkedIn in there?
I'm fine with it. Yep.
Okay.
If I don't like you, you're getting blocked.
Yeah, that's true. I guess you got the ultimate power there. No, thank you. Thank you so much for being here, man. I guess I should probably wrap up before I get distracted by all these awesome links you've provided. Thank you so much for being here. Thank you, everyone who's tuned in for all this. Thank you to all of the awesome support staff. I don't think I've done shout outs for them before, but thank you for all the support staff that makes this happen. Our wonderful folks over in marketing, Rana and those guys, and then Emma and Jesse as well that help me behind the scenes. Thank you, everyone, for tuning in. This has been a wonderful and awesome Hack the Box AMA. And until next time, happy hacking. Thanks, everyone.
See y'all.